Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com and president of the Football Writers Association of America. We're coming to you live on our CFB Nation YouTube channel again. It's a Friday afternoon, a little bit of a spontaneous podcast with the Michigan ruling coming down. Thanks to Brian Driscoll at Irish Breakdown for setting this up for us. If you want to subscribe, just go over to YouTube, search CFB Nation, and click subscribe. I didn't have time to do a Trocchi trivia question. Sorry, Bender. I was going to try to that'll return next week, I guess. But
it was in my column today. We could farm it out to the listeners and just say, I'll do it. Like, there's 13 schools that the Athletic valued at $1 billion.
Yeah.
Which 3 have never vacated a game or had a bowl ban? And if you look at the 2 most watched games in the country last year, you might find those 3 schools. So see if our listeners can dig those 3 up, and I'll just spill that thought at the end.
All right. Very good. Very good. So, okay. So the reason they were having this emergency spontaneous podcast here on a Friday, the NCAA, after they promised that 45 days, we know that it took longer than 45 days, but they handed down the punishment in the Connor Stalions sign stealing scandal. They basically found Michigan was guilty pretty much of everything that was reported during that time. They had a lot of details in there. They issued a 74-page document. They confirmed that Michigan qualified for repeat violator status, I guess. The term failure to cooperate appeared 25 times in the 74 pages, mostly with Jim Harbaugh, who's no longer in college football. And they dropped a penalty, and the penalty is show cause for, like I said, Jim Harbaugh, Connor Stalions, who's also no longer in college football, Denard Robinson, who also is no longer in college football. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Sharon Moore, who I don't even understand what a show cause means because he's keeping his job, and I don't know what that means. But I guess he has a 1-game suspension in 2026. Maybe that's the show cause penalty for that. They're going to have some recruiting restrictions on visits, no scholarship productions, no vacation of wins, and no postseason ban. Bender, is this the penalty you expected?
Yes. And how many years have I said this? 2? Since it started? I could dunk on this podcast for the next 45 minutes, and I should, because no hammer is what you left out. What hammer are we talking about? Like, here's the thing, and here's the theory, and you have to be a natural cynic like I am to see this all the way through. Yeah, like, they're not going to hammer a $1 billion entity in the college football playoff era. Now, I do agree. I talked to Brian Driscoll before we came on. The penalties are, if you can get past your fandom and your passion, and you've got to vacate all these things that we watched in the past, the penalties aren't that bad. $20 million is a lot of money when you're trying to keep up with Ohio State and other $1 billion schools. Not having 25% of your in-house recruiting visits is a big deal when Ohio State out-recruits you every year, and Notre Dame can out-recruit you, and Penn State can out-recruit you, and you're trying to be the best. And the way that Michigan made it work in some ways was they've never out-recruited Ohio State. They've never had I can't remember the last time they had a better recruiting class. Harbaugh and Stalions, whatever. We knew that. They've wanted Harbaugh. The NCAA's wanted Harbaugh from day one, and he's not coming back. I would anticipate maybe by the time this podcast is over, he may respond in the way that Harbaugh does, because he just does not care about the NCAA.
He made that call. He made that clear.
Right.
In his failure to cooperate, like so many times.
He doesn't care. And the NCAA wants to people will blame the NCAA because that's what we do. Because, like, I was on with Craig Mish at Sports Grid earlier this morning. He's like, every time somebody gets punished, we always have you ever heard in the last 20 years somebody say, man, they should have punished them less? Never. Like, so what are we doing other than raging on Twitter? And here's my favorite one right now is seeing a lot of tweets. Well, it costs $20 million to buy a national title. Yeah, it's going to cost more. Probably going to cost double that in 10 years. It's probably going to cost you $40 million to buy a national title. So, it gets to the root of it. Yes, they got caught doing some things that I thought weren't that big of a deal in the first place, other than going to Central Michigan's sideline in a disguise. So, I mean, I'm not vindicated here by any stretch. I think what they did was wrong. They did cheat, but these penalties are in no way shocking to me.
They were guilty as charged for the most part, and they were a repeat violator. Normally, that is a postseason ban. The NCAA actually said that in the ruling. This would qualify for a multi-year postseason ban, but now we're in the era of we don't want to punish the student athletes, so we are going to fine them instead.
Because we're not going to punish the program with a $1.9 billion price tag, according to The Athletic. That's what it is.
But don't you think so? On that point, a counter to that, they gave Ohio State a postseason ban in what, 2012?
Before the playoff.
Before the playoff, but because it was still big money back then, wasn't it?
Before the playoff. They would never do that to Ohio State now. Like, not in this.
They're not going to do it to anyone now.
Right.
Clearly.
That's what I'm saying. Like, all of these, like, you can juxtapose the Ohio State case against the Michigan case, and you have an argument, because their punishment was ridiculous too. They punished them over memorability. They should have never had a bowl ban that year. Now they making Terrell Pryor ineligible at the time. Yes, he accepted illegal benefits, got caught doing it. They punished him and 4 others. Boom Herron, man, that would have been a good Trocchi trivia. Adams was another one. DeVere Posey maybe was in that. I don't want to put DeVere on there, so I'm not going to say DeVere because I like DeVere. He does a good job. But my point is, the 5 guys that got punished. They didn't have to give them a bowl ban that year. They shouldn't have. In Ohio State, the year they were banned, went 12-0. So I thought that punishment was ridiculous too. But they did get punished. Tennessee, LSU, and Notre Dame have vacated victories since the playoff era. But they didn't get bowl bans. And they didn't get postseason. Notre Dame didn't get a postseason ban. And I don't know if those are even effective, other than, who those serve? Not the universities, not the playoff, not the football. They serve the fans. Like, the fans just want to say your team cheated. And that's what this comes down to. So,
well, I mean, they can say that whether it's a post ban or not.
Well, they can, but then the other fan base can say it doesn't have an asterisk next to it. What are you going to do? That's all for the fans. And to me, I mean, I live right in the middle of it here in Columbus, and I'll maintain that they're not going to feel better anyway till they beat them on the field. Like, they got what it comes down to from that angle is Ohio State was 17-3 against Michigan this century before 2021, and before this 40-3 run over a 3-year period. They lost 4 in a row and they're mad about it. Like, that's the truth. Like, you can say Connor Stallions, the only game of the 4, can't say anything about last year. They were 20.5-point favorite and lost. Can't say anything about 2023 really, because Stallions was gone and Harbaugh wasn't on the sideline. You can look at that 22 game. That's probably fair. 45-23 in Columbus. There was a handful of plays in that game that were that. I don't think you can look at 2021. I think they went up to Ann Arbor and let Hassan Haskins run for 6 touchdowns. And Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks. And that's the hard part for Michigan. This will be always a fix to it. It will. We talked about that before we came on. But our editor said something to the effect of nobody's going to remember the Michigan national title. They're going to remember Connor Stallions. I actually think it goes the other way. Do you know offhand who's the USC coach that got in trouble with Reggie Bush? Todd McNair. You know now, but it's like, does anybody know Cam Newton's dad's name? Connor Stallion's probably a little more famous because of the way they went about this, but I don't think in 10 years anybody's going to care, honestly, outside of Columbus, Ohio, East Lansing, Michigan, Knoxville, Tennessee, maybe TCU, but they won the game. And we'll go about our business.
Well, it goes back to the issue of the NCAA trying to make people follow the rules, right? And you want to be rulings, you want to serve as a deterrent so people do not cheat in the future. And I think a lot of people see this as it's not really a deterrent. It's $20 million for $1 billion program. That doesn't sound like too much. I think a postseason ban would have an impact because the fan base would be upset about that, because they would have to listen to, oh, you're not going to a bowl game this year. I do think there's a certain merit to the argument that you shouldn't punish the students who are there, although I don't totally follow that, because if you are company A and the accountant is cooking the books and the IRS comes and says, you have an accountant cooking your books, and company A says, that accountant doesn't work here anymore, the IRS is going to say, okay, no fine. Don't worry about it. We're all good. I think they're still going to issue a fine, and they're going to punish the people that still work there. But with the era of the transfer portal, and people can transfer immediately, in this type of case, with the ruling coming down on August 15th, you can't take the postseason away from this team, I don't think. The NCAA has done it before. They've done it in college basketball. They pulled the rug out from somebody in February, just a couple of years ago or whatever. It was ridiculous. But then I would say you need to do it in 2026. And then you give everybody an opportunity to transfer. And maybe Michigan has one down year and it has an impact. And then they're back to being Michigan pretty quickly after that. So I think that's the sort of the tangible benefit. That is the kind of the deterrent factor that the NCAA should kind of strive for. You mentioned it in your column. A one-year postseason ban made sense, but then you followed it up by saying Michigan's too valuable of a program. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, Florida State went, 2-10 last year, right? And they are one of the billion-dollar programs. That didn't affect college football's bottom line.
They're not Michigan, though.
Huh?
They're not Michigan.
But they're not Michigan. One of the $13 billion. I mean, Michigan has not been good, like, for the last,
Yeah, but people still watch it. And I just had this conversation. It's like when somebody will say, well, Michigan's – what do they say every time Notre Dame loses? What do they say? Notre Dame's irrelevant. Texas is irrelevant. We had Sporting News had a Texas is back button tweet that we put every time they lost. Michigan's in that weight class. Sorry. There's top five, and then there's $1 billion, then there's top five.
So they shouldn't get banned for a year?
Well, I mean, that's why I said it would have been fair, but the NCAA is not going to do that. They're not going to take away Michigan, Ohio. 12.3 million people watched Michigan, Ohio State last year. It's the most watched game every year. They're not going to take Michigan off the field like that.
That's regular season. People still watch that one.
Yeah, kind of. But they watched it more than ever before the last 5 years because both teams are good. They were watching it when Michigan was bad. They were watching it when Michigan was good. But they're not taking that game off the field. Because the sport is driven by TV more than it was 15 years ago. That's another thing we've got to admit to ourselves.
Yep.
Fox and NBC and ESPN, they control this sport more than we're led to believe. And if you don't, then you're just wrong. So, but Florida State doesn't drive the national needle like Michigan and Notre Dame and Texas do, because people love watching them when they win. They love watching them when they lose. I don't think that's the case with Florida State. We weren't like glued to Florida State Duke. Did they lose? I don't even know who they lost to. I know they lost to everybody, but we weren't glued to the. We weren't glued to those games like we were when it's fitting because we have a feature about West Virginia and Rich Rodriguez coming next week. We were glued to Michigan's failures, 3-9. We're glued when Brian Kelly lost at Notre Dame. We're all about that. Texas, I just mentioned, we literally had a go-to social media tweet that made fun of the saying Texas is back.
Well, that was Brian Kelly went 3-9 one year, right? Or 4-8, or
yeah, and we watched it and made fun of him constantly.
But I'm saying, college football's bottom line did not fall apart because they went 3-9 or 4-8.
But they need it. I think they want it and need it more now, though, because this isn't. If you want to go back to 1998, and I was laughing. We looked at SMU and everybody. That's another one. Death penalty. Give them the death penalty. We did. and SMU isn't, that was at an age where we had live TV bans. They were literally banned from television when they came back for their first year. You imagine that? And that,
that killed that they realized after the fact how much that killed that program for 20 years.
They hammered Penn State pretty good for a way different kind of scandal that I prefer not to get into, but it impacted that program. But it's been 15 years or so, and they're number 2 in the nation. So I think with $1 billion programs, it's just like I said, the cynic in me. What Michigan did was wrong. I would have given them a 1-year postseason ban. All of that is fair. But if we're like blaming the NCAA or not, or just raging about it, you're missing the point that this sport is number one about money. And Michigan brings a lot of money in, and that probably helped their case a little bit. Like you were saying, the NCAA suddenly flipped to, why do you think they flipped? Just on their moral, because their moral compass just became a thing? No, they flipped because there's money involved.
Right. They flipped right on the Tennessee case. They had them dead to rights, and when they didn't give them a postseason ban, they tried to get creative with it by fining them the amount of 2 postseasons that they would have gotten, so they could go to these bowl games, but that would just be making up for the fine.
Well, Trey tweeted that too. Trey Wallace, our good friend, he's been on here a couple times. He just said if they didn't give Tennessee a bowl ban, they weren't touching Michigan.
Right.
Again, there's weight classes within the weight class there. And I think, when you talk about those blue blood programs, and like I said, we've seen USC get punished. We've seen Ohio State get punished. We've seen most of those SEC schools. I'm not making a joke there. I'm just literally going through it. Like Florida and Alabama and Tennessee have all been in the NCAA's crosshairs. And, I mean, it's still a stain though. And I think that's probably the lasting part of this is like, it'll be but Connor Stallions was stealing signs. They went 40-3 in 3 years, had one of the best national championship teams of all time. But yeah, you cheated, and you can always say that. And that's probably the worst of it. I don't, Stallions, I don't think he helps himself, Bill. I don't think the Netflix special helped him. I don't think we'll see him on a color.
It helped him financially.
Well, yeah. And I do think there's the way I framed it in the column was they took a gray area and made it charcoal. It's what they did. And, there's some merit to some of the things he was doing and stealing signs, and that's all fair game. But the way that they went about it was wrong. And they are getting hit in the wallet. You can't be one of those people that says, how do you punish a team? You go hit them in the wallet. That's what the NCAA did. Hit them in the wallet. How much money did you want them to give them? Like you said, $100 million? People will find it. I mean, and I think that's the irresponsible spending piece of this. Yeah, like Michigan's going to have to be a little bit more responsible with some of that money. Losing that much money, there's not an athletic director in the world that's going to say that's a good thing.
So $20 million. Here's my unanswerable question to you. How much is it going to hurt Michigan?
I think a little more than we think. Like I said, the recruiting end of it is where Michigan had to be. You want to talk about being creative. They beat Ohio State by kind of getting a lot. Like, look at the guys that were drafted. A lot of day 2 guys, not day 1. Aiden Hutchinson's different. Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy, that core. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to be in the second tier in the Big Ten for the next couple of years. I do think another part of this that's probably not getting talked about enough is Sharon Moore is going to be under an intense amount of scrutiny because, one, it's embarrassing that your head coach is serving a 2-game suspension, and then this is a third different season where their head coach isn't on the field. That's a grand total of 8 games in 4 years.
9. Didn't Harbaugh do 6?
He had 5. He had a 2 and a 3. Or maybe he did have a 3. Well, I better get in my story and fix that right away then. So like a 6 and a – so –
3 at the beginning, 3 at the end.
Yeah, 10 games.
They're undefeated.
10 games in 4 years, you haven't had your head coach on the sideline. That's embarrassing. And Sharon Moore is coming. If they don't beat Ohio State last year, there would be people, Michigan fans, that probably be like, we can fire him, move on. So I think they're going to be a little bit of heat on him on the field, especially in September. Because, again, we can go through.
That's true. I mean, Michigan administration, if they lost to Ohio State last year. It was 6-6.
Yeah, they could have fired him very easily.
And they've got this thing looming over their head. Yeah, they could have pulled the trigger.
And the other thing is, so will they get back to that hardball run of whether Stallions was there or not? I honestly didn't think that mattered as much as they had about 15 NFL guys on the field. That typically adds up, that there will be a lot of pressure on him to win. And because right now, if we're being honest, they're not in the first tier of the Big Ten with Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon until they show it. Now, I do think with Bryce Underwood, they'll be better. But, I mean, again, Sharon Moore is going to feel a lot of heat is my point. And I think that's justified, and he should. And it is embarrassing that, like I said, that you've had coaches suspended, and the story doesn't quite go away if he's serving a one-game suspension in 2026. So this thing is literally stretched 4 years at that point. And John Bacon, my good friend he's read all these books. He's got a book about the Edmund Fitzgerald coming out. Don Canham, old Michigan athletic director, told him, you read any of John's books, do not let a one-day story become a two-day story. Well, they've let this one go for 4 years now. So from that, it's a PR disaster for Michigan. There's no question.
All right, you're Coach X in the Big 12, and you see this news come out, and you've got this situation in front of you where it's gray, so to speak. Are you worried about the NCAA?
No. You mean like what area? Like recruiting? Everybody cheats. Everybody.
This was not a deterrent, is my point.
I mean, this
someone's
isn't
like,
right.
I don't know.
If I want to cheat, I'll cheat more now. Like I'm not going to say everybody cheats because I can't prove it. I can't go to every campus and say this school cheats.
And I'll interject here for a second. Harbaugh, they made it clear. This is NCAA's report, so whatever. They made it clear he didn't care about the rules, and he didn't want anybody else to care about the rules. I don't think that's universal. You know what I mean? I think Michigan might have been a special case with that.
Maybe. I mean, but like, what do you remember? I always say this, like, I was going through this in my head a little bit today. Which Miami Hurricanes national titles in the 80s and early 90s were tainted because they cheated? Nobody knows because nobody cares because it was the U and it was cool. Like,
they never really got caught. They were just kind of.
They kind of got well, they did get in trouble in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Yeah. So like they still but were they cheating or paying players? I mean,
yes.
I've seen both documentaries, so I can tell you the answer. But I mean, I'm not encouraging cheating. I'm just not naive to it. And I, this goes all the way down to where I'm at with my kids, where I say, where you have the parent on the lacrosse field, not on the lacrosse field, it's sport. That guy wasn't out there last time. I don't care. I don't care because I've taught both of my kids. I was like, people are probably going to cheat in this stuff. We won't do it. Beat them anyway. And that goes back to a Jim Brown story that I heard where he was talking about when Jim Brown was golfing once, these guys he was playing golf with were cheating on the course. And Jim Brown knew it. Somebody brought it to his attention, and he said, I'm going to beat them anyway. And that's the attitude you have to have in college football. And if you don't, you're probably going to lose because you have to assume other programs are trying to find those edges that they found. Michigan's is very highly publicized, obviously, and it's on the field. But to me, it's no different than the extra benefit that a player might get or looking the other way when a test doesn't happen. North Carolina basketball, by the way. Did they get touched? Did Kansas get touched in basketball? This is the reality of these things.
Bill Self got a lifetime contract. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying if you are a cynic like I am, this is the sport that you watch. So you can either choose to rage about it on Twitter, and I'm going to give you a hint, that's not going to go anywhere. Or you can just, okay, what's next? So what's next to me is what can the NCAA do? I think you need a commissioner. I think you need actual ways to enforce cheating or tampering.
So it's a deterrent. That's my point, right?
Yeah, like you need something more than what we have. Because if they're going to do it this way, they can do whatever they want. They changed what they used to say. They used to punish schools, and then when people would bring up, well, you're affecting the kids that weren't a part of that, they didn't care. So they pick and choose when to care and what to care about. And that's the NCAA experience. And if you don't know that by now, I can't help you.
So last point before we get out of here and get back to work. The headline in your column, you went through the losers of the scandal, and you labeled Michigan as a loser. I would say the popular sentiment is today they are a winner. So I wanted to hear your take on why Michigan fits the loser category.
Because it's the whole leaders and best culture, right? Like we're above reproach. Notre Dame acts like that too. Certain schools act like that, that they do things the right way, and we're above like that. That's over. Like you can't. I think they're a loser from the standpoint Jim Harbaugh, who was brought on to save this program, will be known by whatever cross section of college football fans as a cheater who did all those things you just said, knew the rules, didn't care. I think that 40-3 run, there's going to be people that say, hey, the COVID year happened, and then all of a sudden they were super good, and it has to be Connor Stallions. I don't think that part's true. I think it's a help. It helped, but I also think they had however many guys. They had like 14 guys drafted. I think it helped to have J.J. McCarthy.
He was an amazing coach, amazing recruiter. He didn't have to do it. That's the disappointing thing.
And then I think, just that's why they're a loser, because they put college football fans through this story for 3 years. And it took my biggest issue is like that chapter of Ohio State, Michigan over on the field from 22 to 24, maybe even last year, you could group that in 21 to 24. It's as good as anything I've ever seen with the game. You had undefeated teams, high stakes games. The dynamic between the two was amazing. And then you throw that on top of it.
4 straight upsets, right? Wasn't
well, yeah. I mean, like Michigan's winning this game, and that hasn't happened. But this story takes away from what should have been a really awesome chapter in the game's history. And it wasn't just Ohio State wins every year, or Michigan. Well, honestly, back in the 90s, Michigan wins every year. It was awesome on the field. The games were, I still 23, the one Harbaugh was suspended for, that was as good an atmosphere for a football game as I've ever seen. Well, it was Michigan, it was Ohio State, it was vicious, and the Wolverines win. 22, same deal. So it takes away from that for me. And I champion that rivalry as the best in all college sports. This is an ugly chapter in that, though. And I don't know if it'll be the same because, they can go back and forth, and you can not like the other guy because you don't like his team, but now you're not liking the guy because you think you got cheated. And no matter what the degree of that is, it's going to be part of the story. And I think that's why Michigan's a loser here.
All right. Well, I think we've talked Connor Stallions to death here.
Right. I don't have to write about it anymore, correct?
He may pop up here and there. Who knows? He might try to get back into college football. Actually, I doubt it. If he's got to sit out a year, I'm not sure how anyone's going to hire him. So anyway, all right. Well, that's our take. We're going to have a lot more college football preview content coming up, sportingnews.com, like you mentioned. We got the Rich Rodriguez story coming up on West Virginia. We've got a fun story on the 1990 Georgia Tech Colorado split national championship that we'll talk about a little later before week 1. And we're a few days closer to week 0, Bill, than we were the last time we did a podcast.
I'm going to have week 0 picks on Monday.
All right.
So we're ready to go. But yeah, super, we had good content on this today. Hopefully we don't have to talk about stealing signs ever again. And we'll go from there. But we're super fired up.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for listening to the CFB Nation All-America podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Irish Breakdown, your source for Notre Dame football information. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you soon.